Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a book that definitely shook things up for a lot of people thinking about money. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What the rich teach their kids about money that the poor and middle class do not. Came out in 97, so it's been around, but still feels very relevant. It's, not your typical finance book, maybe 200 pages, more like self-help meets financial philosophy. Our mission today is to, well, unpack its core ideas and figure out why it still hits home for so many.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just numbers, isn't it? And I think what makes it so sticky is that whole framework Kiyosaki uses, the two dads. You've got his poor dad, right? His actual father, very educated, stable government job, valued security, the traditional path.
Right, the conventional wisdom path.
Exactly. And then there's the rich dad, his friend's dad. An entrepreneur, didn't have the same formal education level maybe, but focused purely on building wealth.
Right.
Financial independence through investing, through business.
Such a stark contrast.
It really is. And that contrast is the whole point, basically. It highlights how your mindset, your financial literacy, that's way more important than just how much you earn or, what degrees you have. It's a genuine perspective shift for a lot of readers.
Absolutely. That setup really drives the whole book. So, okay, let's dig into some of the key lessons that come out of that contrast. He starts off pretty bold, talking about our most powerful asset.
He does. It's that quote, the single most powerful asset we all have is our mind. If it is trained well, it can create enormous wealth. And what's interesting there, I think, is it's not just about learning stuff. It's almost about unlearning what society tells us about jobs and security.
Unlearning. Tell me more about that.
Well, he argues that school teaches you how to be a good employee, right? But it often fails, completely fails sometimes, to teach you how money actually works. The nitty-gritty of taxes, debt, how investing really builds wealth. It's what we don't learn that holds us back.
Okay, so training the mind is step one. And building on that, there's this really fundamental concept he hammers home. Assets versus liabilities. Sounds simple, but he says most people get it wrong. What's his take?
Right, and this is probably one of the most talked about parts of the book. His definition is super clear, maybe deceptively simple. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket, period. Think investments, rental income, maybe business profits.
Okay, money coming in. Got it.
And a liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. Car payments, credit card debts, student loans. And here's the controversial one for many: your own house if you have a mortgage on it.
Right, because of the mortgage payments, taxes, upkeep.
Exactly. It's constantly costing you money. So his big advice is summed up in that line. Rich people acquire assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets.
So the goal is always buy things that generate income, minimize things that drain income.
That's the core of it. Constantly ask yourself, is this purchase going to make me money or cost me money over time?
It seems straightforward, but like you said, why do so many people end up buying liabilities thinking they're assets? What's the block there?
Oh, I think it's deep-seated stuff. Societal pressure, keeping up with the Joneses. We're often taught to value consumption, maybe over investment. A bigger house feels like success. A fancy car feels like status.
But they drain your cash flow.
Precisely. Kiyosaki would say they're traps, disguised liabilities that prevent you from actually building wealth-generating assets.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's another idea that flips the script: work to learn, not to earn. That seems counterintuitive in a world where the paycheck is king. What's he getting at?
It's about playing the long game with your career. It's not just about the salary figure right now. He's saying prioritize jobs or opportunities where you can acquire valuable skills. Skills like sales, marketing, leadership, negotiation.
Skills you can use to build your own thing later.
It's exactly. Skills that are crucial if you want to become an entrepreneur or an investor. It's about shifting from being an employee, reliant on that paycheck, to developing the tools to build your own financial engine.
So you're working strategically, not just for the money.
Right. Learn the skills, then leverage them to create assets.
Which leads naturally to the ultimate goal for many people who follow this philosophy: passive income.
Yes, that's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah.
Breaking free from trading time for money. Kiyosaki really pushes building multiple streams of income, especially passive ones. Income that comes in whether you actively work that day or not.
Like
Rental income from real estate, dividends from stocks or businesses you own part of, royalties from intellectual property. This is how you escape what he calls the rat race, that endless cycle of working to pay bills, needing to work more to pay more bills.
building systems that work for you.
That's the essence of it.
Now, it's not all just definitions and strategies. The book really digs into the the emotional side of money too, right? The psychology.
Oh, absolutely. He talks a lot about how fear and greed are huge drivers of poor financial decisions. Fear of losing money makes people too conservative. Maybe they avoid investing altogether. Fear of failure stops them from starting a business.
And greed.
Greed can make people take foolish risks, chasing quick returns without understanding what they're doing. Kiyosaki argues that becoming financially literate actually helps manage these emotions. It reduces the fear because you understand things better.
So knowledge builds confidence.
Exactly. Confidence to take calculated risks, not reckless ones, to see opportunities instead of just obstacles. It's about mastering your own emotions around money.
Okay, so we've covered some big ideas. And clearly, this book has struck a chord with millions. What are its biggest strengths? Why does it connect so well?
Well, its simplicity is definitely key. The language is straightforward, very accessible. You don't need a finance degree to get it. And the two dads narrative is just, it's brilliant storytelling. It makes the lessons really memorable and relatable.
Yeah, that contrast is powerful.
It really is. And it's undeniably inspirational. It genuinely motivates people to think differently about money, about wealth, about taking control. Plus, that core message about financial independence, about not just relying on a paycheck. That's timeless, really.
Yeah.
Still relevant today.
It definitely lights a fire under people, but like anything this popular, it's got its critics too. Where does it fall short, especially for maybe someone looking for concrete next steps?
That's a fair point, and probably the most common criticism. It's much more philosophical, more why than how. It inspires you, but it doesn't give you a detailed roadmap, No step-by-step plan for investing or starting that business.
So you're left thinking, great ideas, but what do I actually do tomorrow?
Kind of, yeah. And some critics say it oversimplifies the risks involved. Real estate investing isn't always easy passive income. Starting a business is hard work with a high failure rate.
Right, it's not a guaranteed path.
Definitely not. Some financial experts also feel some of the advice might be too generalized, maybe even risky, for someone without a lot of capital or knowledge. And then there's that whole question about the rich dad character. Was he real? Did Kiyosaki embellish?
Does that matter, you think?
Well, for some critics, it undermines the credibility. If the central story isn't entirely factual, does that weaken the advice built on it? It's a point of contention.
Okay, so strengths and inspiration and mindset shift, weaknesses and practical guidance, and maybe some oversimplification. Given all that, who is this deep dive really for? Who gets the most out of wrestling with these ideas?
Well, based on what we've discussed and how the book is generally received, I'd say it's great for students.
Yeah.
Getting these ideas early can really shape your financial future. Also, definitely for working professionals feeling kind of stuck in that rat race and looking for alternatives, maybe side hustles or first investments.
People looking for a different path.
Right. Entrepreneurs, too. It really validates that mindset of independence and taking calculated risks. And, even if you're dealing with debt, the different perspective on assets and liabilities, on spending habits, it could spark some useful changes.
So it has broad appeal, but maybe serves different purposes for different people.
Exactly. And that's reflected in how sources rate it. Like 5 out of 5 for simplicity, definitely 5 out of 5 for inspiration and motivation.
Brought lower elsewhere.
Yeah, maybe more like a 2 out of 5 for practical guidance and the actual depth of content. So overall, you land somewhere around a 4 out of 5. Strong on the mindset, lighter on the mechanics.
Okay, so we've really walked through the core philosophy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That stark difference between assets and liabilities. The call to work for skills, not just salary. Mastering the fear and greed around money.
Yeah, the big message is clear. Financial understanding, that literacy is more critical than just academic smarts or even a high income. It's about buying assets, avoiding those fake assets that are really liabilities, and building systems, businesses, investments that generate money for you.
Moving beyond just trading hours for dollars.
Absolutely. And embracing calculated risks, overcoming that fear of messing up.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the mindset you bring to money is more important than the amount of money you start with. A job can be, as he puts it, a short-term solution to a long-term problem unless you're strategic about it.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. If Kiyosaki is right that mindset matters more than money, and the goal is building systems that make money for you. But we also know the book gets criticized for lacking that practical depth, for maybe glossing over real-world risks. What's your next concrete step? How do you bridge that gap between the powerful inspiration of Rich Dad, Poor Dad and taking calculated, informed action in your own financial life? What specific skill or piece of knowledge do you need to acquire next to truly train your mind and move forward? Something to think about.